Many people would claim nowadays that being able to elaborate correct arguments, being articulate or being capable of communicating your reasoning in a clear and logical way is of the utmost importance. And please don't take me wrong, I am one of those, okay? I have a philosophy YouTube channel, right? I really love and enjoy critical thinking, elaborating good arguments, using logic in my daily life, right? Even if that's, not the most socially sexy thing to do, yes, logical arguments have a huge value in my life, and I think it should be something that we need to promote even further in society. However, if you are someone who, as me, enjoys, using logic in your daily life, but when you go outside, you go to the world, then you notice that, actually I am using logical arguments and I'm not persuading anyone. It's very dramatic because you're very sure that you're elaborating a correct argument, and then someone may appear, uses a fallacy, and that person, gets all the credit. And that person, is being admired by everyone and, followed by a bunch of people who are not realizing that they're being, logically scammed, let's call it, right? And for many years I found that infuriating, because let us not hide the truth, okay? We all, the logical nerds, will dream of a world in which logical arguments, are the main engine, the main pusher of society, whatever. Yeah, that's a dream. We may want to aspire to have that one day. Well, I'm not very sure that will ever happen, but yeah, I think we have that inner desire of having a more logical world, right? But when we see these examples, of people getting away with fallacies or whatever other resort, then yes, what to do? Or better, why logic fails to persuade? I think a huge mistake that people who love logic commit is, thinking that only by means of giving a correct argument, that means that you are done. That means that you succeeded. That means that you did your job. And if the other people don't get it, well, it's their problem. They're on the wrong. Therefore, well, I did my part. They didn't listen. I am right. I go home. But I still failed. I failed to communicate. I failed to create a connection with someone else. I failed, to make someone view a different perspective on a problem. So what are the limits of logic, right? You may wonder this. It's a very valid question because, if we think about it, yeah, correct arguments, logical arguments, are not enough. They're not enough. There's another component that is more linked to our animality, let's say, to our biological way of being, that it's, beyond just pure reason. And this, animality, as I'm calling it now, this, strong link to our emotions is actually the main driver of persuasion. And people who study body language have realized this long ago. There are different studies on this, okay? I'm not particularly an expert on body language myself, but for a long time I've seen studies that say that, well, some claim that 90% of communication is nonverbal. It's not the words you say, I've heard different proportions for this depending on the study, but in general, 90 to 93% of what actually persuades the other person is not the contents of your words. It's not that, which may be very depressing, right? Because if you're making a logically correct argument, then that is only 5% of the persuasion process. But what really persuades people is, for instance, the body language, as I was saying, but also the tone in which you say something. Think of this, and try to let's go on memory lane, as they say, and think of your school years, for instance, and try to remember, a classmate or a teacher that spoke funny, that have a very funny tone of voice. That's something you may remember very clearly right away, or someone who had some sort of like compulsive movement that they couldn't stop doing, and you remember those people because of these things. Now, it is much harder to remember something particular that they said, right, in terms of pure contents, right? So in these body language studies, normally is like between 85% of persuasion is conveyed by the body language itself. Then the rest, depending on the study again, but between 10-15% could be the tone of what you say. The tone of your voice. And then again, the minimum part, 75, is the content. I'm sure I didn't add to 100% now because I'm mixing the studies in my head, but the point is the proportion, okay? That's what I want you to remember from this video, the proportion, okay? So if you just focus on logic and on elaborating correct arguments, you're focusing only on the 75% of the persuasion equation. And this explains many, many things. Think of political life, especially nowadays. So in the last, 10, 15 years, in Western countries at least, we've seen a decline of arguments. We've seen a decline of, actual debates with only the arguments, right? Of course, there are elements of, persuasion, etc., but the proportion of arguments has decreased. And we're seeing more animosity, we're seeing more insults back and forth. Those things trigger emotions in us. And politicians know this very well because they're trying to trigger emotions in people who will eventually vote for them if they manage, to trigger the correct emotions in them, to move them to vote. They're very clever people, They're doing this on purpose, of course. And again, those of us who love logic see this decline in the quality of the arguments as, as a tragedy. But also, we are not at the same time entering the same game. Because we say, okay, no, we only use the logical arguments and we don't mix with these people, It's a kind of an elitist kind of impulse, right? That's also an emotion, okay? That's also an emotion. Be aware of that, okay? So, in this video, I would like to invite you. I'd like to invite you, yes, to reflect on this, please, okay? If you're one of those who just, is feeling comfortable with just providing arguments and that's it, well, bear in mind that is quite insufficient. That is quite insufficient. Because if you really want to persuade someone, you need to connect. You need to emotionally connect with the person. Think of fallacies, for instance. Why do fallacies work? Because fallacies, most of them appeal to certain emotions. The ad hominem is an insult that triggers emotions, but it works. Many people love insults, especially when they're not falling on them. Or for instance, ad misericordiam, they appeal to pity. Again, pity, it's an emotion, and it works because of that. We are emotional beings, okay? We like to think that we are very rational beings, and we are, okay? Most of the great progress we've made as humanity is thanks to our rational capabilities, But let us not forget that we're also animals, that we have emotions, and emotions are actually the greatest part of what we are. So, next time you're confronted to this insufficiency of logic, try to think on the emotions that are discussed, the emotions that are at play in the discussion you're in. And, I hope this is a good guidance. I hope that this will give you food for thought. Because, we may love logic, but we know that logic is not enough to persuade. Just giving the correct argument is not enough. We need to learn how to deliver those arguments. Thank you for listening. Subscribe to the channel. Till next time.